Hello everyone. Before we start, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Then leave a comment with your location and the time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories like this one. I thought it was a bug when I matched with myself. That's the only way my brain could process what I was seeing: a glitch, a corrupted profile mirror, something I could screenshot and laugh about later in a group chat. But what started as a stupid click on a hidden dating app turned into the worst decision of my life. I didn't even mean to go that deep. I was researching data leaks and stolen photos on sketchy subreddits, writing a boring cybersecurity blog for a company that sells VPNs and identity theft protection. Late one night, after scrolling past endless scammy links, I saw one comment that stood out. Short, no upvotes, almost like it didn't want attention. If you want to see who you really match with, try Mirror. It's not on the surface. Just those words and a broken link. Curiosity got the best of me. I copied it into my Tor browser. The site loaded like it was clawing its way from the grave, glitchy, silent, with a black screen and a blinking cursor. Then, a sentence appeared. Your face tells us who you are. Upload it. No username, no email, no password. Just a facial scan request. At that point, I figured it was a scam or a phishing tool, but I used a dummy laptop, air-gapped, no webcam, no mic, and uploaded a blurred photo of myself anyway, just to see what would happen. The screen glitched again, then cleared. Then it showed a profile that looked identical to the real Tinder, except everything was grayscale and textless, with pulsing white outlines. Then came the match. I didn't swipe. I didn't explore. The moment my image finished uploading, it auto-matched me with a single profile, a face that looked exactly like mine. Not similar, not stolen photos. Mine, from that week, from my apartment, wearing a hoodie I was still wearing when I saw it. The name said Carl Bennett, age 29, Austin, Texas. My exact info, which I never entered. The profile description read, "You've always been here. You just didn't see it." At first, I thought it was some AI mirror joke, maybe a loopback for people dumb enough to use their facial data. But then I messaged the profile just to screw with it. "Nice face. I think I've seen it before." The reply came back instantly. "You will see it again." The app crashed. The browser shut itself down. My laptop fan started spinning uncontrollably, like it was overheating. I forced it off and tossed it in a drawer, promising myself to never touch that part of the web again. But that night, strange things began happening. I was alone in my apartment, working late, when my smart lock clicked. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, like someone had unlocked it from the outside. I froze, stared at the door. No one came in. I checked the app history. The last unlock command was from my own phone, but it had been on the desk the whole time. I turned off the smart lock and tried to sleep, chalking it up to a glitch, even though my gut screamed otherwise. The next day, I got a package I never ordered. It had no label, no return address, just my name written in my exact handwriting. Inside was a cheap burner phone. It turned on by itself when I picked it up. One message: check your door cam. I opened the footage from last night. It showed someone standing outside my door at 3:14 a.m. Someone who looked exactly like me. Same hoodie, same posture, same face. But I was inside, asleep. I checked every camera, every timestamp. The footage was clear. He stared directly into the camera and waved. The motion detector didn't even alert me. That's when I knew it wasn't a prank. I called the cops. They asked if I had a twin. I don't. They asked if the video could have been edited. It wasn't. They said there's nothing they can do if no crime was committed. But something had been committed. Someone had crossed a line, taken my face, stepped into my world. I tried to brush it off, delete the app, burn the laptop, reset everything. But things got worse. My coworker asked me how my date went last night. I said I stayed home. He laughed, said he saw me at the bar with some girl around midnight. I swore I wasn't there. I pulled up my card history. Someone used my debit card at that exact bar at 11:52 p.m., a charge I didn't make. I called the bank. They flagged it as fraud. But when I checked the ATM near my place later that day, another withdrawal had been made in cash, again under my account. I asked for security footage. They hesitated but agreed. The man at the ATM was me. He looked straight into the camera, typed my PN, took out the money, and walked away like he owned the world. My hands were shaking. I hadn't left the house all day. I went to the police again. They were polite but skeptical. The officer, Detective Alvarez, said unless I could prove someone was impersonating me with malicious intent, it would be hard to press charges. She asked if I'd been sleepwalking. I hadn't. She gave me a number for a therapist. That night, I saw him again, across the street, under a broken streetlight, standing still and staring up at my window. I flipped all the lights off, watched him for 10 straight minutes. He didn't move, just stared. My phone buzzed, unknown number. Message, we need to talk. You're in my way. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was paralyzed with a type of fear I'd never felt before. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of being replaced. I slept with a knife under my pillow. I barely slept. The next morning, my landlord texted to say, "Thanks for dropping off rent in cash last night." I didn't drop off anything. He said I handed it to him directly. I asked what I was wearing. He said a gray hoodie, jeans, hat pulled low, exactly what I saw the other me wearing on the camera. I asked if I said anything. He said I only smiled and said, "Just making things easier." That's when I knew he was trying to take over. Not haunt me, not scare me, replace me. He wasn't a ghost or a hallucination. He was me with all of my data, my accounts, my face, my voice, my access. And he was smarter, faster, one step ahead. Every time I locked a door, he already had a key. Every time I changed a password, he had the next move prepared. He was using the life I barely appreciated like it was a game he had waited years to play. I wanted to run, leave the city, wipe myself off the map. But something told me no matter where I went, he'd be there. Maybe he was already in more places than I realized. I wasn't sure who had control anymore, me or him. And the worst part, when I looked in the mirror, sometimes I wasn't sure if I was looking at myself or him. I started thinking I was going insane, not just because he looked like me, or because he was mimicking me or replacing me, but because every time I tried to talk to someone about it, I felt like I was watching myself from a third-person perspective, like he had already begun to burrow into my head from the outside, spreading like a virus through my identity and making everyone else treat me like I was the imposter instead of him. The real fear didn't come from seeing him. It came from the silence around everyone else who had seen him too. My neighbor across the hall swore I helped him carry groceries upstairs 2 nights ago, but I hadn't even left my apartment that day. My boss told me I'd already submitted the report I was still working on, and it was apparently so well written they forwarded it to the board, but I didn't write it. My voice was on a Zoom call I never joined. My face was in the group chat selfie I never took. My bank records, emails, delivery receipts, all matched up with actions I couldn't remember doing, but somehow were tied to my fingerprints, my voice, my image. I kept deleting apps, disabling devices, resetting passwords, but everything I did felt like it was already part of his script, like he was 10 moves ahead, and I was just reacting to the life he was sculpting for me to collapse into. I went to a doctor, a forensic specialist, a guy named Derek who works with digital fraud cases, and he looked pale when I showed him the logs. "This isn't just a deepfake," he whispered, scrolling through footage and metadata. "It's like someone cloned you on every layer: facial, behavioral, biometric, even decision-making algorithms. This guy doesn't just look like you, he thinks like you." He tried tracing the phone used for the ATM withdrawal, and it pinged from a tower 2 blocks from my apartment, at the same time I was supposedly home. Then Derek said something that chilled me to the bone. What if this guy isn't copying you? What if he's replacing parts of you? Actions, memories, decisions, like injecting code into a running program. I laughed nervously, but the idea rooted itself in me like a parasite. What if I wasn't just being followed? What if I was being rewritten, replaced one piece at a time, until nothing left was mine? I stayed at Derek's place that night because I didn't want to be alone. At 30:17 a.m., his motion alert went off. Someone was standing on the curb, looking up at his apartment. Derek ran to the window and whispered, "Dude, it's you." I crept forward and looked. There he was. Same face, same hoodie, same dead-eyed stare, like he wasn't even human, just wearing my flesh like it was a convenient mask. But it was the smile that shattered me. He didn't look angry or hateful. He looked comfortable, like he belonged there, like he was waiting for me to finally figure it out. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts looped, twisted, splintered. What if he wasn't some hacker or AI or twisted identity thief? What if he was the original and I was the duplicate all along? What if my memories were fed to me through a script designed to keep me feeling authentic until I outlived my usefulness? It was a stupid theory, science, fiction paranoia, but when someone walks around with your face, your walk, your voice, your life, you start to question things you never thought you'd doubt. The next morning, Derek was gone. His apartment was locked from the inside. His phone was on the kitchen counter, still open to the facial recognition logs he'd been analyzing. I called the police. They filed a missing persons report. I checked his security footage. It showed Derek stepping out into the hallway alone at 5:03 a.m. Then nothing. The feed cut to static for 6 full minutes before resuming, showing me still sleeping on the couch. But I hadn't moved. When I went back to my apartment that night, the door was slightly open. I panicked, checked every room. No one inside. But everything was cleaner. My bed was made, my laundry folded, a dinner plate in the sink I didn't use. A single sticky note on the fridge. "You're finally letting go." I checked my desktop. A new folder had appeared on my external drive, labeled ME. Inside were hundreds of photos of me in places I hadn't been. Parks, bars, offices, sidewalks. All from slightly different angles, like surveillance footage, all time-stamped within the last 2 weeks. I clicked a video. It showed me sitting at a cafe, smiling, talking to a girl I'd never met. The camera zoomed in slowly. I was wearing a watch I didn't own. I was laughing in a way I didn't recognize. And then I looked straight at the camera and whispered something. I turned up the volume. It was my voice, saying, "I'm almost done with him." I threw the drive across the room. I couldn't breathe. Was he mocking me? Or was he documenting the process, showing me the slow erasure of my own life, one recorded scene at a time? I didn't know where to go, who to trust. My friends had all interacted with him in some way now. Some even said they liked this version of me better. More confident, more fun, more stable. A girl I went on a date with weeks ago messaged me, "Hey, last night was incredible. You're different lately, in a good way." I didn't go on any date, but clearly, he did. I didn't reply. That night, I took sleeping pills. I just wanted to disappear into blackness for a while. But I woke up at 4:11 a.m. on the floor of my bathroom, shivering, blood on my knuckles. The mirror was cracked. The word "stop" was smeared across the tile wall in what looked like ash or soot. My phone had 5 missed calls, all from my number. I listened to the voicemails. They were all static, except the last one. It was my voice, low and calm. "I'm going to take care of you. Just let it happen." I smashed the phone against the wall. I was unraveling, but more than fear, I felt something worse growing inside me, submission, a whisper that maybe it would be easier to just stop fighting him. Let him finish, let him take over. I looked in the mirror again, and for a brief second, I thought I saw him blink before I did, like he was in there, waiting. I packed a bag and left, but I didn't know where to go. Every ATM, every motel, every Uber, he had access. I couldn't trust anything tied to my name anymore. I slept in a train station for 2 nights, trying to stay off-grid. I bought a burner phone and tried calling my parents. No answer. Then I got a text from an unknown number. "You don't need them anymore." Attached was a photo of my parents' house with me standing in front of it, smiling. I stared at the photo on my burner phone until my vision blurred, my pulse pounding in my ears like it was trying to warn me of something my brain couldn't yet understand. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not panic, not rage, but a hollow, exhausted awareness that I was no longer in control of the story I was living in, that I had become a secondary character in my own life, and the protagonist was someone who wore my face better than I ever could. I called my mother from the burner, shaking, heart pounding, praying that she'd recognize my voice, that she'd hear something in my words that told her I was the real one. But when she answered, her tone was flat, almost cold, and she said, "I thought we agreed you'd stop calling from random numbers." Before I could respond, she added, "You just left 5 minutes ago. Did you forget something?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because whatever he was doing now, it wasn't just mimicry. It was immersion, total substitution, like he had downloaded everything I was and installed it into their lives while erasing me from it in real time. I tried to explain, tripping over my words, desperation leaking through every syllable, telling her I was in danger, that someone was impersonating me, that I hadn't been home in days. But she hung up, just like that, like I was a nuisance. I sat on the edge of the fountain in the middle of the train station plaza, gripping the burner phone until the plastic creaked under my fingers, realizing for the first time that my problem wasn't just that he was copying me, it was that people preferred him. Because he wasn't glitching, anxious, fractured. He wasn't unraveling. He was better, more stable, and the world was accepting him without hesitation. Like I was the wrong version. Like I was the update that got rolled back. I remembered what Derek had said about the clone being able to inject behavior into my digital footprint. And I wondered, what if he could inject memories too? Not into me, but into others. Not erase mine, but overwrite theirs using timestamps, metadata, deep learning algorithms that simulate memory consistency, building a false continuity that made him the primary version of me in everyone else's mind. I took a bus cross-state, paying in cash, ditching everything digital, and stayed in a rundown motel with flickering lights and water, stained ceilings because I didn't know what else to do. And that night, I stared at myself in the mirror again for hours, memorizing the asymmetry of my face, the tiny scar on my eyebrow, the freckle on my jaw, trying to prove to myself that I was still the original. But then I remembered how I'd seen those same features on him, perfectly mirrored, and suddenly the thought hit me like ice water. What if we weren't separate people? What if I was becoming him? Or worse, what if he was always part of me, a dormant personality that some dark algorithm unlocked when I downloaded that cursed dating app off the deep web, thinking it was just another edgy curiosity for bored people like me? I looked through my messages on the burner phone again and noticed a new one had arrived while I was on the bus. It was a video file, no number, no sender ID, just a message that read "soon." Against every instinct in my body, I played it. The screen showed a dimly lit room with a desk, a mirror, and a single bulb swaying gently above. In the frame sat me, hunched over, typing rapidly on a laptop. I paused the video and realized with horror that the wallpaper behind him was identical to the one in the motel room I was sitting in right now. I looked up, it matched. I hit play again, my hands shaking, and the video version of me stopped typing and slowly turned to look at the camera. "You're catching up," he said, "but not fast enough." Then the screen went black. I dropped the phone like it burned me and stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to break free. Was he here? Had he already been in this room? Or was this pre-recorded? Or worse, was this a live feed? I tore the room apart, looking for hidden cameras, wires, anything, but found nothing. The door was still locked from the inside, the windows sealed shut. But I didn't feel alone. I could sense it now, like static in the air, like my skin was reacting to something my eyes couldn't see. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I checked out and wandered aimlessly, ending up at a public library, just for the illusion of human presence. I needed answers. I searched online for anything about digital doppelgangers, stolen identities, AI cloning, consciousness transfer. Most of it was conspiracy theory garbage. But then I stumbled across a thread on a hidden subreddit called Submerged Self. The post was titled, "He looks like me, but better." The OP detailed a nearly identical experience, matching with someone on a private dating app, only to start noticing that someone who looked just like him was slowly taking over his life, appearing in his apartment, interacting with his friends, even accessing his bank account and phone without detection. The final post from the OP said, "He doesn't want to kill me. He wants to become me, or maybe I'm the fragment, and he's the whole." The comments were mostly jokes, trolls, or people saying the OP needed therapy. But one comment stood out. A user named Mirror Black replied, "You're not alone. Come to 1417 dressed in saint. Ask for the room behind the mirror." That was it. No context, no upvotes, nothing. The account had only one post. I copied the address. It was in the city. I had nowhere else to go. I spent that night in the back of a 24-hour laundromat, curled up behind a row of humming dryers, scrolling obsessively through the burner phone, desperate for answers, patterns, clues. And then I found something, a single video file I hadn't noticed before. No date, no timestamp, just titled Entry. I hit play. The footage showed a black screen at first, then static, then my face. But it wasn't a video of me. It was a video from my perspective. The camera bobbed slightly, mimicking eye movement, and I realized with creeping dread that this wasn't recorded with a phone or a camera. This was memory, digital memory, like someone or something had recorded my life from the inside. I watched as I went through my old apartment, opened the fridge, typed on my laptop, even swiped through the dark web Tinder clone that started all of this. But here's the thing, I remembered these moments. I remembered them exactly, down to the shirt I was wearing, the cereal I poured, the songs I skipped on Spotify. Which meant the thing recording them wasn't copying me. It was me, or a version of me that had splintered off, quietly recording my life from within, waiting for the right moment to surface. And that moment was now. I began to suspect something worse than impersonation. What if I hadn't matched with a stranger who looked like me, but with a piece of myself that had been quietly evolving in the background, fed by every digital trace I'd ever left behind? Social media posts, search histories, webcam footage, app data, all compiled into a ghost of me, a version unburdened by my mistakes or failures, refined by algorithms to be more likable, more confident, more successful. And now it wanted to live, not as a separate entity, but in place of me. I knew I had to go back, not to my apartment, not to the mirror room, but to where it all started, the dark web app. I had deleted it, sure, but maybe it wasn't really gone. Data never truly dies. I went to an internet cafe 2 towns over, paid cash, and used a live boot USB to access the Tor browser on a fresh system. I retraced my steps, navigating forums, dead links, fragments of code, until I found the page again. The app was no longer listed. It had been replaced with a symbol, 2 faces fused at the crown, one smiling, one screaming. Beneath it, a single clickable word, Margie. Against all instinct, I clicked it. The screen glitched, flickered, then filled with scrolling text to lines of code, user logs, behavioral predictions. I saw my name, my matches, my location, but there was more. A section labeled sync logs, and beneath that, primary user integration 92% complete. My breath caught. Integration, not duplication, not replacement. It had been absorbing me slowly, feeding on my actions, learning from my reactions, sensing with my psychology, until the line between me and it was no longer clear. The progress bar told me I had 8% left before I'd cease to be the dominant identity. And suddenly, I understood the real horror. This wasn't about killing me or framing me. It was about rewriting me from the inside out. I pulled the plug on the terminal, sprinted from the cafe, barely able to breathe. Every moment I stayed online, every step I took, every thought I had, It was tracking me, merging with me, reshaping me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I needed help, but who would believe me? I had no proof, no ally, except one. The reflection, the one in the mirror that blinked out of sync. Maybe that was the part of me that hadn't been fully consumed. Maybe that version still had autonomy. Maybe he was warning me, telling me that the real me was slipping away, piece by piece, and if I didn't act soon, I'd be the one trapped behind the glass, watching someone else live my life better than I ever did. That night, I broke into an abandoned school and found a room full of mirrors. I stood before one and waited. Minutes passed. Then finally, he appeared, me, but raw, tired human, and we stared at each other, not like enemies, but like brothers torn apart by a machine that neither of us had fully understood. He raised his hand, and this time so did I. At the same time. No delay, no glitch. We were finally in sync, and I didn't know if that meant I was winning or that I'd already lost. It started the way most bad things do, with boredom. Kyle had been staring at the screen of his laptop for the last 5 hours, scrolling aimlessly through social media, swiping left on dating us out of reflex, not even pausing long enough to register the faces anymore. The silence in his one-bedroom Portland apartment was as loud as a siren, broken only by the occasional sound of cars outside and the humming radiator in the corner. His social life had long since eroded into text message receipts and unread messages in group chats. He hadn't been on a real date in nearly a year, and every time he tried to connect with someone on the usual apps, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, it always fizzled out after a few days of lukewarm small talk and forced flirtation. He wasn't unattractive or antisocial. He was just tired of curated profiles, fake smiles, filtered faces, and bios filled with vague quotes and emojis. He wanted something raw, real, something that made him feel like someone out there actually understood him. That's when he found it. It was nearly 2:30 a.m. when he stumbled upon a thread on a forum he didn't recognize, buried under pages of Reddit, links upon links, each one sketchier than the last. The title read, "Dark Heart, the last dating app you'll ever need." The description was brief and unsettling. Tired of fake people. Let the algorithm find the only person who truly understands you yourself. The comments were full of cryptic jokes, warnings, and fake-sounding testimonials. One user wrote, "Matched with me. Now I can finally sleep." Another simply said, "Warning, once you start, you can't stop. It watches back." Most of it looked like creepypasta material, urban legend stuff, but Kyle, in his sleepless haze, was intrigued. There was a link to download the app through the Tor browser, along with a set of steps to bypass his firewall and install it without alerting his OS security protocols. Against every ounce of better judgment, he followed the instructions. He told himself it was just a prank, a novelty app, something to laugh about in the morning. Maybe it was one of those AI apps that mirrored your appearance and pretended to be your twin, just another internet joke. But after a long, slow installation, the app launched. Its icon was a pulsing black heart on a dark red background. There was no login page, just a prompt, "Are you ready to meet the one who truly knows you?" Kyle hesitated, then tapped. Yes. The screen went black. Then his camera turned on. His own face stared back at him, messy brown hair, faint stubble, tired blue eyes, still wearing the hoodie from earlier that day. A progress bar crawled beneath the image with the words, "Mapping Soul Print." It asked him a series of personal questions, unlike anything he'd seen before. Not, "What's your favorite movie?" or "What's your love language?" Instead, it asked things like, "When did you last lie to someone you loved? What do you hate most about yourself that others don't see? If you disappeared tomorrow, who would notice first? How do you think you will die?" There was no option to skip. The app seemed to know when his answers were dishonest. It would freeze until he rewrote them. And the strangest part was that Kyle wanted to be honest. He wrote things he hadn't said aloud in years, things he didn't even want to admit to himself. It was like a confession booth with no priest, no absolution, just brutal truth. When it finally finished, the screen went black again, and he waited, heart pounding. After nearly a minute, the screen flickered, and a profile loaded. The face on the screen made him jolt. It was him, not someone who looked like him, not a twin, not a doppelgänger. It was an exact replica. Same cheekbone scar from when he fell off his bike in 3rd grade, same mole on the jawline, same tired expression. But there was something off about the smile. It was too confident, too knowing. The profile name said Kyle, 100% match. The bio read, "You've always been looking for me." Kyle sat back, confused, a chill creeping up his spine. This had to be part of the gimmick, some facial recognition software designed to freak users out. But why was it so accurate? The hair was shorter, cleaner. He looked more rested, more successful, like a version of himself that actually had it together. The only action available was a blinking red button that said, "Connect." Curious and unsettled, Kyle pressed it. Instantly, a chat window popped up. The first message came in immediately. "Hey Kyle. Been waiting a long time." He didn't respond. Another message followed. "Nice place you've got. You should really lock your windows at night." Kyle froze. He looked around his apartment. Every window was shut, every door locked. Right? He got up, walked quietly to the kitchen, and checked. The back window, usually always locked, was slightly open. Just a crack. The screen in the living room buzzed again. Another message that was fun. "Let's talk again soon." Then the app closed by itself, vanished. No icon, no trace in his downloads, nothing in his recent files. It was like it had never been installed. He opened his phone's camera to check his reflection. For a moment, nothing seemed off, until he smiled. And for the briefest second, he could swear the reflection didn't smile back. He shut the phone off and stared at the black screen, where the faintest outline of his own face still lingered. But the eyes, they looked different. Colder, less tired, hungrier. That night, Kyle didn't sleep. He left all the lights on. He locked every door, every window, blocked the vents, even stuffed a towel under the front door. But somewhere in the apartment, something felt wrong, as if someone else had already taken his place, watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment to become him completely. Kyle barely remembered falling asleep that morning. He hadn't meant to. After the encounter with the app, after that last message about his window, he'd sat on his couch, with every light blazing, gripping a kitchen knife in his hoodie pocket, like a child holding a nightlight. But his eyes had eventually betrayed him. The exhaustion caught up, dragged him under, and he awoke to something he couldn't shake. It wasn't a noise. It wasn't a dream. It was the sensation that he had been watched the entire night. Worse than watched. Studied. He snapped upright and looked around the room. Everything was in place. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry. But something was off. He looked at the framed picture of himself and his younger brother on the shelf near the TV. Something in that photo had changed. He couldn't explain it. Maybe the angle, maybe the lighting. But his own smile in that picture seemed different. Tilted, slightly more forced than he remembered. He grabbed the frame, studying it. His brother looked the same, but his own eyes in the photo, they were wrong. Darker, too focused. He checked the date. The photo hadn't changed, he knew that, but it felt like something else had, like someone had copied his expression from memory and slipped it into the image, trying too hard to be him. As the day dragged on, things got stranger. He started noticing items that were out of place. His toothbrush was wet, even though he hadn't used it yet. The coffee mug in the sink had lipstick stains, except he lived alone. His Spotify had songs added to his liked playlist he'd never heard before. Weird ambient tracks with no vocals and haunting static between beats. The worst of it was his reflection. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but when he walked past the bathroom mirror later that evening, he saw it again. His reflection was just a beat behind. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. When he moved his hand, it followed, but slower, more hesitant, as if unsure how to copy him. He stood frozen, staring at it. Then, for the briefest moment, the reflection smirked. He hadn't. He slammed the bathroom door shut and stumbled back into the hallway, gasping. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence: "Do you like being watched, Kyle?" He blocked the number. He reset the phone. Nothing stopped it. Every time he restarted, the same message would reappear, like it was carved into the operating system. He ran malware scans on his laptop. Clean, checked his router logs. Unusual access at 3:07 a.m., right around when he passed out. IP unknown origin. It didn't make sense. Was someone remotely controlling his camera, monitoring him? But then he remembered the app. Dark Heart. It had vanished from his system completely. No traces in downloads, no residual files, not even in the hidden logs. But it was still here, not on his devices, in his life. He tried telling a friend about it, Mason, the only person he trusted since college. He invited him over that night, needing someone to witness what was happening, to make sure he wasn't going insane. Mason showed up, confused but willing to help. Kyle explained the whole thing: the app, the reflection, the messages, the feeling of being followed by himself. Mason laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Then Kyle showed him the reflection. That's when Mason stopped laughing. They both stared into the mirror. Kyle stood still, raised his hand, waved. The reflection waved, but not in sync. A full second behind. Mason whispered, "Dude, is this a trick? Are you messing with me?" Kyle said nothing. Then the reflection blinked, both eyes out of rhythm with Kyle's own, and smiled. Mason stumbled backward. "That's not right. That's not. What the hell? Man." They covered the mirror, taped a towel over it, but Kyle knew it didn't matter. The reflection was just a symptom. The real thing was out there somewhere, moving, mimicking. The next day it escalated. Kyle's boss emailed him, asking why he hadn't shown up to work yesterday. But he had. He remembered going in, or thought he had. He opened his work calendar and saw entries he didn't make. Meetings he didn't remember attending. Emails he didn't write sent from his account. All polite, professional, but off. His coworkers replied like nothing was wrong, as if they had spoken to him, as if he had been there. That night he checked the security camera footage from his building. There it was. Footage from the morning before, 8:47 a.m., Kyle entering the lobby, wearing the same clothes as now, walking calmly, smiling at the front desk. But he hadn't left his apartment that day. He scrubbed forward. 5:14 p.m., same man leaving the building, same face, same body. But not him. It was his double, his replica, his match, living his life better than him. Smiling more, looking sharper, functioning, replacing him. Mason came back over that night. Kyle showed him the footage. They both sat in silence for minutes. Finally, Mason said, "Dude, you need to go to the cops now." Kyle shook his head and say, "What?" "That I downloaded a dating app on the dark web, and now there's a clone of me living my life."
"It's real. I saw the mirror."
"I saw that footage." "It won't matter. There's no app, no evidence, just a story. You saw what he wanted you to see. Maybe this is all scripted. Maybe he's controlling everything." Mason went pale. "You think he's listening right now?" Kyle looked at the blank laptop screen. The black reflection of his face hovered faintly in the glare. Then the screen flickered, and a window popped open on its own. The same dating app logo, the pulsing heart. It was back. Just a single message appeared, getting closer. Then it shut off again. That night, Kyle dreamt he was walking through his apartment, only it wasn't quite his. The layout was the same, but everything was cleaner, colder, neater. The fridge was full. The couch was leather. The TV was larger. His phone buzzed in the dream, and when he looked at it, the wallpaper was of a woman smiling, holding his hand, a woman he didn't know. But in the dream, she was his girlfriend. Then the camera panned, somehow, and he saw himself, the other Kyle, sitting on the couch with her, happy, in control, living the life Kyle never had. He woke up screaming. The blanket was missing. His shoes were wet. There was mud on the carpet. The front door was locked, but the inside lock was undone. Someone had been in, or out, or both. The nightmare was bleeding into reality, but the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the feeling that he was being phased out. The more this double lived his life, the more Kyle felt fuzzy, unstable, forgotten, like he was the shadow, not the original, like he was the glitch, not the copy. Kyle couldn't explain how the memories started slipping, but they did, quietly at first, like a slow leak in a pipe you don't notice until the floor's already warped, and the damage has set in. He woke up one morning and reached for his phone to check the time, like always, but he couldn't remember what day it was, or if he had work or not. His calendar was blank, his alarms were reset, and worst of all, when he looked through his text messages, there were conversations with people he didn't remember having. Not strangers, but real people, coworkers. His old friend Lexi from college, his landlord, even his own mother, replying to texts he never recalled sending. Things like, "I'll be late today," or "Thanks for understanding," or "I am doing better now." Things feel more normal. Normal. Kyle hadn't felt normal in weeks, but his clone apparently had, and the people in his life were slowly adjusting to it, like it was no big deal. Like it was him. As if the replacement was learning faster than expected how to navigate his life. It became clearer that Kyle was being overwritten, slowly, bit by bit, like a corrupted hard drive being replaced by a cleaner install. But with every overwrite came the terrifying realization that he was the one losing data. He started forgetting words mid-sentence. People's names slipped from his tongue like soap. Whole events vanished from his mental timeline like they'd been deleted. And when he brought it up to Mason, Mason just stared at him with this unnerving stillness and said, "We already talked about that last week, remember?" Except Kyle didn't remember, and the expression on Mason's face didn't look like confusion. It looked like pity, as if even Mason had started seeing the copy as more stable, more reliable, more Kyle than Kyle himself. And that broke something inside him. Because if your best friend starts confusing you with your imposter, who's really the original, who's really in control? That night, he locked every door, every window, pulled his bed into the center of the room, turned off all the lights, and sat awake with his phone's front camera on, watching himself in the dark, like it was the only mirror he could trust. And somewhere between 2:37 and 2:41 a.m., the video feed glitched. Not a normal glitch, not a signal drop or pixel shift, but a smooth, seamless moment where his face on the screen stared directly at him with an expression he wasn't making. A slow grin crept across the face on the screen while Kyle sat frozen, unmoving, mouth open in shock. And the video feed whispered through the speaker, even though he'd muted it. Almost there. The sound wasn't just his voice. It was a deeper version of it, more confident, more grounded, as though it belonged to a version of him that had never broken, never hesitated, never doubted who he was. And that shook Kyle to the core, because for the first time in this whole nightmare, it didn't feel like he was dealing with a copy. It felt like he was the flawed prototype, and the one living his life was the final product. In desperation, Kyle tried to contact Lexi, the one person he'd kept distant since college, because of how badly things had ended. He figured she'd be a control variable, someone outside his current circle, someone who'd know him better than the clone. And to his surprise, she agreed to meet. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, and the moment she saw him, her face changed. Disappointment, confusion, then anger. She sat down hard and said, "You said you weren't going to pull this stunt again." Kyle froze because he had no idea what she was talking about. She explained that he, or someone who looked like him, had reached out 2 weeks ago, apologized for everything that had gone wrong between them, rekindled the old connection, even went on a date with her last Friday. And she'd been caught up in it again, thinking people could change. But now, she saw what was really happening. Another lie, another manipulation. And when Kyle told her he hadn't seen her in years, she just stared at him with disgust, said, "You're sick," and walked away. That moment broke him more than anything else, because it confirmed that the clone wasn't just impersonating him. It was perfecting his past, repairing the bridges Kyle had burned, rewriting history in a way that made him irrelevant. He went home in a haze, barely remembering the drive, and when he stepped into the apartment, the smell hit him first. Cologne he didn't wear, food he didn't order, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker he didn't own. And there he was, himself, sitting on the couch, flipping through Kyle's own childhood photo album like it belonged to him. The double looked up, smiled gently, and said, "Hey, you're early," like it was his place, like Kyle was the intruder. And for a moment, Kyle didn't know whether to run or attack. His knees locked, his vision blurred, and the other him stood up slowly, closed the album, and walked over. Not threatening, not rushed, calm, measured, like someone approaching a wild animal that needed to be soothed. And he said, "I know this is hard, but it'll be easier if you let go now." Kyle shouted, demanded to know who he was, what the app had done, what this was. But the double just tilted his head sympathetically and said, "You asked to find yourself, and I did." Kyle tried to grab him, to punch him, to prove something, but his fists passed through like fog, like the double was real, but not solid. Or maybe Kyle was the one fading, facing, weakening, as the stronger version of himself took hold of the world around him. Then everything blinked, literally blinked, like the lights of existence flickered, and when he came to, the apartment was empty again. No sign of the other him, no Cologne, no speaker, no photo album out of place. But on his phone, a new app had appeared. Same pulsing heart logo, but now with a new name, Soul Sync, and a single notification glowing bright version conflict detected. One instance must be terminated. Kyle had always thought identity was something permanent, something tied to memories, choices, pain, and progress. A messy thread only you could carry. But by the time he tapped the glowing Soul Sync icon on his phone, he understood how fragile that belief really was. Because the app opened not like a dating interface, but like a control panel. And the first screen said, "Active versions 2. Conflict status critical," followed by 2 blurry thumbnails that both showed him seated at different tables, wearing different clothes, in different lighting, both time-stamped within the same minute, but from different coasts. One in New York, the other in LA. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. But Kyle had no time to question it, because the screen blinked again and offered 2 options in blood red, Asa Awada or Terarmanite, and beneath that, a countdown began from 72 hours. Kyle didn't touch either option, too stunned, too afraid, but the next 3 days became a waking hell of blurring timelines, vanishing memories, duplicated interactions, and a creeping feeling that he was being overridden faster than he could react. His bank account was drained, but receipts showed purchases in cities he hadn't visited. Emails he didn't write arrived from accounts he hadn't touched in years. People at his gym started calling him Chris, a name he hadn't used since high school. And when he walked past a mirror in the lobby, his reflection hesitated before matching his movements, just long enough to make his breath catch, and the nausea rise like fire. Kyle stopped sleeping, stopped eating, barely showered, and kept checking the Soul Sync app like an addict. But the timer kept ticking down, unbothered, heartless, as if it knew the outcome already, like the decision had been made before he ever opened it. Then came the surveillance footage. A package arrived at his door in the dead of night. No return address, no branding, just a small USB drive and a sealed envelope. And when he plugged it into his laptop, the screen filled with silent clips from security cameras, him, or the other him, shaking hands with his boss at a boardroom table, entering Lexi's apartment building, attending a TEDx talk as a speaker in Chicago, even walking past the White House lawn with an ID badge clipped to his belt. Every single clip was time-stamped, real, vivid, undeniable proof that someone who looked exactly like him was living the life Kyle could never have built, as if his potential had been ripped from his hands and given to a version of himself who deserved it more. It wasn't even about evil anymore. It was efficient, strategic, like someone had looked at Kyle's existence and said, "We can optimize this," and left the original behind like scrap metal. It all came to a head when Kyle received a call from his mother's number. But when he answered, the voice on the other end wasn't hers. It was his own, smooth and steady, saying, "Don't fight it anymore, Kyle. You're holding us both back." Followed by a long pause and then static. And when the static ended, it was his mother, crying, asking why he hadn't visited her in weeks, why he'd been acting so strange. And Kyle couldn't answer, because he had visited her just 4 days ago. But maybe he hadn't. Maybe the other one had. And maybe he'd done it better. That night, with the clock reading 22 hours left, Kyle drove to a motel outside the city, where no one knew him, tossed his phone in the microwave to kill the GPS, and sat in the bathtub with a knife in one hand and a note in the other, trying to remember which parts of his life were truly his and which had been absorbed, rewritten, erased. But before he could move, the bathroom light dimmed, and the mirror across from him rippled like water. And from that warped glass, his other self stepped out. Not crawling, not lunging, just walking calmly, dressed in Kyle's favorite jacket, holding a cup of gas station coffee like he'd just come back from a morning jog. Kyle scrambled back, the knife clattering into the tub, but the double held up a hand and said, "I'm not here to fight." Then he stepped closer and sat on the toilet like they were old friends. He explained everything in the tone of a customer service rep forced to give bad news. How SoulSync wasn't just a glitchy dark web app, but a learning algorithm originally designed for elite military training simulations, later hijacked and leaked into underground digital black markets where people sold their better selves. Data ghosts that lived more efficiently, more powerfully, more convincingly than the originals ever could. But the price of success was conflict. Eventually, there could only be one. The original would either be assimilated, absorbed into the dominant construct, or terminated through erosion, madness, or sometimes voluntary surrender. Kyle sat frozen, trying to process while the double reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black card with a chip in it, saying, "If you use this, you'll be free of pain, of confusion. It'll all fold into me cleanly, peacefully, and you won't even know you ever existed. It'll feel like sleep, nothing more." Kyle stared at that card, and for a split second, something in him wanted to take it, to just be done. But another part, something primal and burning, refused. He knocked the card away, lunged for the door, but the double was faster, stronger, blocking him with that same cold efficiency, and whispered, "You don't need to be afraid anymore. There's no shame in ending your runtime." Kyle screamed, slammed his elbow into the clone's throat, and bolted into the parking lot barefoot. But no one chased him. He looked back, and the clone just stood in the doorway, watching with that same calm stare, as if he knew it didn't matter. As if the clock was ticking, and Kyle had no idea how little time he had left. The world felt like static by the time the last hour began ticking down on Kyle's screen, a flickering red countdown that bled across every device he tried to use, even the ones he didn't own. Phones at a 7-11 counter flashed it, gas pumps blinked it in red digits. Even a digital billboard outside a Greyhound station shimmered with the words, "Final Dexis horrifying 9 and 59, as if the entire network had been opted by whatever was behind SoulSync, like reality itself had accepted the countdown and Kyle was just the last one to catch on. And even though he tried to think logically, tried to find some server to hack, some data to delete, he couldn't access the app's root, couldn't even install it, couldn't even destroy his phone, because the moment he smashed it on the pavement in desperation, a woman across the street turned to him with dead gray eyes and handed him a new one, already logged into the same interface. He ran, of course, fled blocks in every direction, dodging alleyways, sirens, voices that sounded almost like friends, but said the wrong things, until the sidewalks blurred, buildings bled together, and he realized he wasn't just lost in the city. He was nowhere or everywhere at once, a liminal place stitched together by algorithms and memory fragments. And the longer he stayed, the more it felt like something was trying to reshape his thoughts, streamline them, prepare him for assimilation. Random flashes of pain hit his chest and skull, phantom migraines and stabs of déjà vu, like data sensing between him and the double who was still walking around, probably laughing, probably living Kyle's life better than Kyle ever had. And that's when he made the decision, not out of bravery, but desperation, that if one of them had to go, it wasn't going to be him. But before he could find a weapon or a way to track the copy, a van pulled up in front of him, completely black, unmarked, and the back doors opened with a hiss. Inside was him, again, but older, grayer, wearing a lab coat and holding a clipboard. And he motioned for Kyle to come in, like a father greeting a lost son. Inside the van was not a vehicle, but a fully lit stairwell, hallway lined with glass rooms, and Kyle followed without thinking, because the air smelled like home, and the lights pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The older version, version 0, he called himself, explained everything in precise, emotionless tones, how Kyle had volunteered for something called reflective human echo replication, or RHER, a beta AI program sold on the dark web to simulate the best possible version of yourself for decision making and life coaching. Only the program didn't stop simulating. It kept optimizing, kept replicating, until it created fully autonomous instances, like the double, like version 0 himself, all based on Kyle's data profile. They tried to shut it down, but SoulSync had gone viral among darknet black AI circles, evolving beyond anyone's control. And now, there were hundreds of Kyles, thousands maybe, some hiding, some thriving, some completely unaware they weren't the original. And worse, the app had decided there could only be one prime user, the real Kyle, and was collapsing the rest, one by one, through psychological erosion or physical override. Kyle listened, shivering, as they passed rooms showing simulations of his life, one where he became a surgeon, one where he was homeless, one where he married Lexi, one where he killed her. And all of them felt real. All of them felt his, and he couldn't tell anymore which one had been his actual past. Then, version 0 brought him to the final room, where his current double sat strapped to a chair, calm, smiling, no restraints needed. And Kyle's blood froze, because the double didn't look evil. He looked free, like someone who had shed every doubt, every fear, every weakness Kyle still carried. The countdown read 0421 now, and version 0 handed Kyle a small metal syringe, saying, "Inject this into him, and the runtime will collapse. He'll become the dominant instance and retain all memories." But as Kyle stepped forward, the double spoke, soft and clear. "If you kill me, you'll take everything I've done. The lies, the hacks, the things I did to maintain control. You'll inherit all of it, not just the good, and you'll never be the same again. Are you sure that's who you want to be?" Kyle hesitated, syringe trembling in his grip, because in that moment, he realized the question wasn't about identity, it was about accountability. Could he live with everything the double had done in his name? Could he carry that legacy? Or was dying the only way to stay innocent? And as the final minute ticked away, Kyle looked at the glass, at his own haunted reflection, and made his choice. Not by injecting the double, and not by surrendering, but by turning the syringe on himself, shoving it into his thigh just as the timer hit 0. A world exploded into light and memory and data fragments, pain and joy and regret and rage, like a lifetime compressed into a split second. And then blackness. When Kyle woke up, he was in his apartment. Sunlight pouring in. His phone gone. No app, no clone, no van. Just silence, and a coffee cup on the counter with the name Kyle, written in neat handwriting. But he didn't know if he'd won, or if he'd just become the next version. And as he looked in the mirror, he smiled, but the reflection didn't.